African Americans resist slavery. Of course, nobody wants to be a slave, and they're going to do their best to resist. Now, the life of a slave was horrible. Um, all aspects of their lives were controlled by their slave owners. Okay, when they were sold, um, and they could not control who bought them. Okay, now although many, it says, of the slave owners treated their slaves well, some did beat and abuse their slaves, and even if you're treated well, you wouldn't want to be a slave. Um, the owners would tell them when they had to start to work, when to end work. They could not leave the plantation without permission. Owners decided whether slaves could get married or not if they wanted to. And when they finally had children, when those children were going to begin working as slaves on the farm, which my guess would probably be a young age. Now, they did pass the slave codes, which are kind of like laws that are going to be used to control the behavior of slaves and make it difficult for them to uprise. And for the test, you're going to have to know at least 3 of these slave codes, but I mean, I don't know, you could learn all of them. Of course, you are not allowed to hit a white person no matter what, okay? Not even if it were in self-defense, okay? Of course, you could not own property, because if you own property, that means that you have power. And you were not allowed to buy and sell goods because, again, if you have money, you have power. So how did the slaves resist their owners? Well, they did this by holding back on their work, which is the main thing that they can control. Sometimes they pretended to be sick. They would break their tools so they couldn't work. Some of them resisted slavery by learning how to read and write. And, of course, if they were found out, they would be punished. And here's an example here of a family that the slave owner is going to try to either sew off the whole family or separating the family, and then, of course, they had no control over that, which will be horrible. All right, so the slaves, every once in a while, they would rebel, and here are a couple of rebellions that we need to learn about and learn. The first one was Nat Turner. Now, what Nat Turner did was he and some of his followers, they had an uprising, and they killed about 60 whites in Southampton, Virginia. Now, of course, soldiers could not let of the South could not let this go unpunished. So the soldiers ended up killing more than 100 African Americans in retaliation for this. Okay. Of course, Turner was later captured. He escaped, but he was later captured, and then they hung him on November 11th of 1831. Okay. Another famous rebellion that we need to know about happened on the ship called the Amistad, which was a Spanish slave ship. Now, what happened was they left the port in Cuba, and they were sailing to America when Josephson came and others on board took over the ship. Okay, and he said we might as well die trying to escape, because slavery is no way to live. Okay, so they took control of the ship. So they're able to take control of the ship. But they didn't know how to sail, so they told the Spanish sailor to sail them back to Africa. Okay, of course, he tricked them, and instead of sailing back to Africa, he sailed the Amistad north, okay, along the coast of the United States. Now, I'm not sure why he didn't go to the south, but they ended up in New Haven, Connecticut, and at first, the United States just planned to return the ship to and the Africans back to the Spanish. Now, abolitionists and northern newspapers did not like this idea, and they supported the rights of the Africans. So, because of their help, it ended up going to a court case all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, former President of the United States, John Quincy Adams, okay, he's going to represent the Africans. He argued that they were not property, and the Supreme Court reached this decision and agreed with Adams, and they freed the Africans, and all 35 were sent back to Africa. So here we have a picture of St. Cane on this page, and that is a reproduction of the ship that they sailed on. Now, we all know about the Underground Railroad. It really wasn't a railroad. It really wasn't underground. That was just a nickname for it. But here's a map showing some of the routes that the Underground Railroad took. And the reason it was called an Underground Railroad was along their journey, those who helped were called conductors. So these were people who secretly helped African Americans escape to the north. Okay? And the places where they stopped were called stations, and they would stay there until they felt it was safe for the person to continue on their way north. Okay. How did they know how to go north? The slaves knew that if they followed the North Star, that they would always be headed in the right direction. And even if it was like a cloudy night, what they did was they would feel for moss on tree trunks, because moss tends to grow on the northern side of the tree. Okay. Of course, we all know about Harriet Tubman. Here she is right here. She helped many slaves. She first of all escaped. After she escaped, she returned to the South 19 times and led more than 300 people to safety. And she never let even one of her people escape. Okay. Some other famous people in the Underground Railroad was Levi Coffin. This was a white teacher who opened up a school for slaves in North Carolina. Of course, he got in trouble for opening up a school for slaves. They made him close it down, but he and his wife helped more than 2,000 slaves escape to freedom. So they are very prominent in our history as well.